Okay, here's a little more about some opposites. And so you've seen this, the theme, I'm just going very quickly, but the theme of opposites it comes up significantly. And Baba goes into the topic here, and he uses, this is the source diagram at the bottom, so recreated it like this. By the way, the titles of figures we came up with. There are no titles in the source. Can you all hear me okay? Have I been speaking loud enough?
Yeah.
Okay. He wants to make the point that opposites are very close to each other, almost immediately adjacent. And this figure illustrates it this way. A and Z are opposites in the processional things. You go from A to B to C to D, etc. W, X, Y, Z, right? But they wind up being right next to, almost immediately adjacent to each other. That is in the nature of opposites. So then from here, Baba goes on to say something more about the subtle and the gross, and about the human eye. And I think this is really, really startling. And certainly, who would ever have thought of this? And that's what this diagram is about. This one here, which we have over there. Cassandra had all of these made up so that people could look at them at their leisure.
So wonderful. Thank you.
And Baba says that, remember that the Pran and Akash are opposites, right?
Yes.
And Pran winds up producing the subtle. The subtle universe is the manifestation of Pran. Subtle means the entire inner world, first plane to sixth. And the gross world is the manifestation of Akash. Well, the reality is infinite light, right? Remember that one? We had light and ocean. The subtle, being immediately adjacent to it, like the little point is the point of reality, the Om point. The subtle is adjacent, and thus it is dark. And it might seem surprising at first, but it doesn't to me. I mean, when I think of if I were to plunge inside myself in meditation to find God, the first thing I would sort of encounter is going back there somewhere. It would be dark somehow, Like people often prefer to meditate in darkness. But the gross then, remember, Pran and Akash are opposites, right? So Akash is the opposite of Pran. So Akash is light again. But it's faint light. It's not the primordial light, it's faint light. So you go from faint.
Oh, faint. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
You go from the true pure light, which is the real light, the nur, or whatever term you were talking about before, the light that is the same thing as God. But then the subtle domain is dark, and the gross domain is light again, but it's faint light. Now, this part would be really worth studying in conjunction with the opening pages of In God's Hand. You know In God's Hand? Which is an illuminationist metaphysics. It'd be interesting, there's a great illuminationist tradition in Sufism going back to Sohrawardi. I don't know if any of you ever read Sohrawardi, who created a metaphysics based on light and darkness. Very famous mystic. He wound up getting crucified. So sometimes it's better not to be a really great metaphysic. Just being a sort of good one is probably safer.
Just below.
Yeah, just don't get your head up too high. But this is the first written discourse we have of Baba's In God's Hand. And it talks about natural light, natural darkness, unnatural darkness, and unnatural light. And it would be very interesting to bring that into relationship to this. I think it would work very well. First couple pages of In God's Hand there. So anyway, so you get the idea again. The real is true light with a capital L. And the subtle domain, the entire inner world, is dark. And the gross domain is light again. But it's not that infinite true light, it's faint light. Right? And remember that crazy stuff we were just talking about astronomy and reflections and that kind of thing? Makes me think of that. Okay, this is displayed in the eye. And that's what this diagram is. Okay, these are the two gross eyes we have. And the point there is the point of light, right, in the pupil of the eye. That's an image of the true light. Around that we have the iris, right, which is dark. And around the iris we have the white of the eye. Thus, the human eye is an expression of the cosmos. Isn't that amazing? It is so meaningful. The eye is...
I didn't get it.
Huh?
I didn't get that.
So you know the pupil of the eye, right?
Right.
Like whenever somebody paints the eye, they always put a point of light there.
Yes.
So that's like the Om point, which is the compression of the infinite reality of things. And surrounding that is the, you know, the iris, the dark of the eye?
Yes.
And around the dark of the eye is the white of the eye, right? The white of the eye corresponds to the gross. The dark of the eye corresponds to the subtle. And the point of the pupil corresponds to the reality.
Oh, how beautiful.
Look at the stuff he was telling these kids. I mean, isn't that amazing? Had you ever thought of that before?
No.
You know? And that's, now this diagram is particularly, it's developed in a very strange way. Okay, these are the two gross eyes, and here is the third eye that corresponds to this point in the physical anatomy. And it has the same fundamental structure. So there's the pupil, the point of the pupil, surrounded by the iris corresponding to the subtle, surrounding by the white corresponding to the gross. And this is going to take some puzzling out, for people to work on this, but this seems to be showing a relation between the gross eyes and the third eye. And he places mind here. Actually, all of our experience, all of our consciousness comes out through our third eye. The third eye is the source of it. We may not be conscious of that fact, but it is in fact true, through the gross media. So we have to come out through the mind to the gross eyes out here. And but then he shows the planes of consciousness going up to what looks like this part. Elsewhere, Baba has said this part of the head corresponds to Brahma, or the reality. There. Isn't that an interesting diagram?
Yeah. And I'm sort of taken with this idea that the third eye is the creator point.
Right, it is.
Chart. Mm-hmm. And the path, Tariqat, is above that, leading to Brahma. Whereas I would think that creator point would be
up there
after the path.
Yeah, you'd think to put it right up there.
Yeah, well, I think so.
No, I get it. That's kind of the paradox here.
Yeah.
It is odd.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And more, just if we can, should we look at this diagram top to bottom or bottom to top? Because it's a different explanation if you look at it from bottom to top.
Okay, I'm going to read the key so that you've heard one key anyway, which does speak to some of this a little bit.
Thank you.
So a lot of the keys will give various information about the source or helping people to read the diagram. This remarkable diagram shows the relation between the third eye and the two outer eyes of the gross body. Between these inner and outer eyes, Baba has ranged the mind, right? That's this right here. Third eye, two eyes, and the mind has been placed there. Between the third eye, conventionally associated with a point between the eyebrows, right there, and Brahma, associated with the upper forehead, arranged the planes of the involutionary path. So this is just describing what we've just seen physically in the diagram. The pupil of the eye represents the creator point, or the point of light with a capital L, means reality. Immediately adjacent and therefore opposite, the iris of the eye, corresponding to the subtle, is dark. The outermost ring of the gross maps in this ocular analogy to the white of the eye. Okay, we've just been talking about that, right? The subtle is dark. You see, again, did you know the subtle is dark?
No.
Yeah. It's sort of, you would say, oh no, it's got to be light because all the prana is there. But fundamentally, it's dark.
Because it's not known to
What's that?
It's not known to the gross world. We don't know it.
Right, so it seems dark to us.
And they're like saying like the dark night of the soul.
The dark night of the soul, right. Right. It somehow makes sense to me.
Yeah. Is it the real dark?
Huh?
Is it the real darkness?
The real, I think this would be the unnatural darkness. The natural darkness would be like the nirvana state, something like that. That's what I think. But that's why this is really worth reading in conjunction with In God's Hand. Really is.
Is it just dark in relationship to the ocean? Is that what's considered dark?
Well, the ocean being the reality of things? Yeah, that's the real light. That's the opposition there. The reality and the subtle are opposites in that way. And again, you see why the proximity of opposites is the topic with which Baba led into this. This is really kind of a deeply subtle succession and linking of topics in all of this. Can I read this since it isn't? Yeah. The discussion of light and darkness.
You didn't read the top part, the faint part. Faintly so.
Where did I stop?
The gross opposite to it, and therefore, from the outermost ring of gross maps.
Okay, the outermost ring of the gross in this ocular analogy corresponds to the white of the eye. Since it is immediately adjacent to the subtle, the gross is opposite to it, and therefore it acquires the attribute of light, though only faintly so, because it is far remote from the third eye as the source of pure light itself. The discussion of light and darkness invites comparison with Baba's treatment of that topic in God's Hand, written by him in 1925. It is, and I find this to be a curious feature of this diagram, it is hard to establish with certitude from what angle of vision the head is being viewed in figure 17, since its perspective seems to be both, I can't quite read, from the front facial and from the top down. Perhaps the diagram is akin to Cubist art in depicting from both angles at once.
Oh, the Cubist.
What do you think?
Yeah.
So this sort of looks like the forehead,
Yep.
and that sort of looks like here. But now, wait a second. That's not right. This is like looking from the top where the eyes are bugging out in the front. So it's almost like you're looking at from both angles at once.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I have to say I'm serious about this. Whether I look at it over there or as long as it's been on the screen, I wish they had depicted it differently because I keep thinking third eye on wheels. I'm serious, it was depicted differently.
It looks like a baby.
Well, that'll be,
Looks like a charcoal grill in my backyard.
well, that'll be the next stage of social services in Los Angeles when they get spiritual. I want my third eye on wheels. I can't travel to get one. Meals on wheels and third eye.
Next time they do this chart, you should do it in 3 dimensions to show that, you know,
Yeah.
you're looking at it from 2 different views.
So,
Yeah.
So you said that our consciousness comes from the third eye.
Yeah, right from there.
Yeah. So as a creative point. So I'm kind of thinking about the role that the mind plays here. Does the mind actually rehash or filter out our pure consciousness?
Well,
Or how
consciousness
does
has to go through it
Consciousness has to go.
for us to have consciousness of the gross world. For example, the mind would encompass or extend to the senses, manas, the 5 senses, through which we apprehend the gross sphere. So consciousness has to go through that for us to reach the gross eyes.
I see. So that sense, our past sanskaras, or
They would come into play
they
there,
would
yeah.
come to play.
Yeah.
So then we get the colored version when we get to the gross eyes domain.
And you know, Sam, in terms of the question you asked earlier, because this is an odd feature of it, in a way, I would say, hey, Baba, you should have put this up there. Right? But trying to puzzle it out, because I found that odd features in Baba's diagrams are really worth studying and often turn out to be meaningful. So it occurs to me, maybe this is showing the third eye in its role in a gross conscious person. And that third eye, you might say, moves up through the planes through involution. Maybe something like that. So maybe this is a picture of a gross conscious person. Something like that.
What happens when our third eye is actually open? And Baba said that only opens in 6th plane.
Yeah. You see
So
God.
that's a different, then we get to notice that our third eye at that point, or like be aware of it.
Well, then you become like this.
Wishful thinking, huh?
For some of us,
For some of
Or
us.
like that.
You're already there, but
There we go.
not us.
for some of us it's going to be a while. Some of us had tails in our last lifetime. And if we had seen you, we'd climb up a tree and throw coconuts. Yeah. Anyway, I mean,
This is so cute.
this is an illustration of why this book has just amazed me. Every talk, Baba's bringing up new stuff like that. Yes, you wanna?
There's another one, I have another point of view for this diagram.
Yeah.
I mean, if we are seeing the brain from above, then because actually the vision is in the back of the brain, not in the eyes. The eyes are only kind of like cameras or whatever it is, but the kind of the real eye, is back. So, well, that's another explanation.
So you're thinking the real seat of consciousness is up there?
The real vision is in the back of the brain. And then the creator point is in the third eye, but yes, but the real thing is there. I don't know, it's just another way.
Could be, because this actually is, after all, only the creator point, not the infinite ocean itself.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that could be. So the real seat of infinite consciousness is there.
And I have another interpretation.
Another interpretation.
Just to make it, I see the third eye there as representing the organ of the third eye, which is believed to be the pineal gland. That's where it's located. And the projection out to the physical eyes, going through the mind, like that triangle, I would suspect that triangle is the 7 veils. The 7 veils.
The 7 veils.
Veils of that we don't see in the inner light. And then the progression from the pineal gland is where it turns upward to me. Where you go above the head, which is where the chakra is. That projects from that, and that is where you connect it from. I can't wait till the younger people get a hold of this and start putting their imagination in.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of this.
No, I mean, this is wide open for people to explore it, you know. I mean, in these talks, I'm just trying to sort of open the door on basis of my looking at it, but now is the time for people to come in, and I think all kinds of secrets are going to be unearthed through the study of this over time. There's a little funny thing here. I'm going to have to go to the page because I don't think I can quite read it there. Now I have the book. How about that? It's fun. It's an insider joke. This came from, by the way, I was saying the different manuscripts. This source I mean, what a loss if we didn't have this diagram. And this is the only source. And this was Ramju's. I mentioned there's a handwritten manuscript by Ramju, 2 of them. So a lot of the diagrams are from there. So, darn, what page is that on? 168. So, Ramju wrote this funny little note here in the source. Dr. Ghani's head, with apologies for reproduction. Ramju and then Ghani were friends, and you know, Ghani was these jibes were constantly happening. And he said, private, and I said, after 100 years, man, this is going public. You know, I'll just tell this little funny thing where, you know, Ghani was, do you know Ghani? Some of you know Dr. Ghani?
Yeah.
He's one of Baba's really close mandalas, so is Ramju. But Ghani was brilliant, intellectually brilliant, and world-class lazy.
Oh, really?
Spectacularly lazy, you know. And so when I found this out, one time I was asking Baba what Ghani was like, and he said very funny things, but one of them I said, well, Ramju obviously was not lazy. He was really hardworking. So I said, and they had a business together and they had all sorts of stuff. So I said, how did they get along? How did he put up with Ghani anyway? And Eric said, with a lot of cursing.
But Ghani also had a big head.
That's the thing. He had a very big head, yeah.
And he was Baba's classmate, right?
Childhood friend, yeah.
And they would joke with Baba.
Yeah, oh yeah,
So
yeah.
nice.
Oh, there are fantastic stories.
Very good.
So this makes me think that Ghani was probably there for a lot of this also. Well, let's see. Now, one other little point about the waveform. Okay, we should get to astronomy. We've done a lot of it already, but the one thing about the waveform, right? Like that waveform, Baba gave a very interesting analysis of it. He said in the waveform, the crest is the pran, and the trough is the akash. So if you think about that, he said pran and akash clash, the waveform comes out. And its nature is the combination of prana and akash. I think it's fantastic. So, fundamental metaphysics. You know, the waveform is in many ways the source of everything. Okay, in Indian metaphysics, you've got the Brahmanad, the word of God, or Christian metaphysics too. In the beginning was the word. What is the word? Vibration. What is vibration? Waves. What are they made of? Prana and Akash. Light also is made of prana and Akash. There are all these gems in this thing. These amazing things are revealed. Okay, here's a little bit more on mystical astronomy. Okay, Nadia, she created this. The diagram in the source, there's a space for a diagram, but it was never filled in. So she came up with this idea, which is really fantastic. I'll read a little bit here. Okay, I'll read the key. In his introduction to the series of lectures on mystical astronomy, Baba enunciates the principle that the infinite, Anant, Ant means finite and An means not, so the infinite, Anant, is straight, and the most finite point as its opposite must be round. So that's a basic principle. And he says that the infinite appears straight from whatever angle of vision you look at it. But now people would usually think of the circle as being somehow the representation of God or something, but it's not. It's the form of the most, thus the Om point. A point is infinitely finite and it is essentially circular in form. And because of that, everything that comes out of the Om point originally is circular in form. Thus, light globes are circular. And the shadows of light globes, like worlds and suns, are also circular. That's where that form originates. I mean, look at when Baba introduces these topics. It's almost like he's building it almost like in a logical way or something.
Wow. You know, that reminds me of Zarathustra. He says that, God is a straight line, it's there's only one way, and that's the straight way, meaning that's God.
That's Zoroaster? Zarathustra?
That's one of the things that, we learn as Zoroastrians.
Wow.
And then everything else is circular, meaning everything else is opposite.
Yeah.
It has opposites. It is in the duality.
Right.
I never thought of that. That's beautiful.
Interesting. So there's a Zoroastrian link. I didn't know about that.
Yeah. And I always thought of, people think about it, you have to be straight and you have to be honest and this and that. But I always thought that there's more meaning to it.
Yeah.
And
so here he says that, yeah. So this is how Baba starts talking about astronomy with this geometrical principle, correlating geometry with metaphysics, actually. So, though the manuscript sources have left, okay, I created it.
Why do you think he used the geometrical representation, just to make it easier for us to grasp for the kids?
I mean, I think it's probably a fundamental truth.
Fundamental truth.
Yeah. There seems to be, in Meher Baba's Darshana, there seem to be numerological principles. Back in Middle Ages, they were into that, and Plato and Pythagoras were. But modernity has rejected it and sneered at it in the most part. But I'm not so sure they would now. Now we're getting a lot of the current accounts of things seem to see mathematics as primary, not the primary order of things. But there seem to be certain numerological principles, but now this is related, a geometrical principle, it seems. Yeah. So the Anant has as its opposite the most finite. Anant means infinite, right? Yeah. The straight has as its opposite the round. Therefore, the most finite must accordingly be round. However finite a point is round. And this is true of any point. Indeed, the only anant or infinite is free, only the anant or infinite is free from this roundness. Roundness is the shape of the most finite. Here Shri, by the way, they called him Shri in those days. Here Shri recapitulated, drawing deductions from the figure that had been previously chalked out and referenced through this discussion. You see, we know a figure was drawn, but it doesn't appear in our manuscripts. God is Anant. God has as its opposite the most finite. Then again, God's opposite is round. Shri went on. Okay, I think I may, let's see, what is this? Okay, what comes out of the point must be round, since the point itself is round. In one of our earlier talks, we observed that innumerable light globes emerge from this point. It follows, then, that these light globes must necessarily be round in shape, since the point from which they emanate has this shape. We have explained then why the light globes are round in shape. Now, each of these light globes has its own shadow. This shadow means a world. Now we're starting to get to that, like our Earth as an example. Let us take the case of one light globe as represented in figure 19 on the next page. Okay, so now we're going to start to get to this topic of the worlds. And we looked at this before, right? So you guys have totally mastered this piece of cake, right? Yeah. So this is the light globe. It's round because the own point is round, and so the light globe is. And the world the light globe is a shadow of light, and the world as a shadow of the light globe is dark. Now, okay, again, I'll just go over this quickly. We did this before, but the world casts its shadow into emptiness, or pokol, hollowness, and that image captured there like a mirror receives the light of the light globe and reflects it back on the world. And in that way, this image becomes the world's sun. Right? By the way, in one of his discourses, Upasani Maharaj says, the sun is black. And people asked him, why do you say that? And he said, I see it. I directly see it. And it makes me think, what is the essential nature of the sun? Pokal, emptiness, right?
Image of the world.
Yeah. So, yeah. So Baba then goes on with this for several lectures. And he wanted to illustrate the principle. Okay, you've got an image in Pokal, right? Now he wants to explain reflectedness between of images. And he did this with these boys he had a mirror, he had two mirrors, and he had a light source. This would still have been in the West Tank Room, which is now the museum. So if you can imagine, Baba's there and all the boys, 100 of them are crowded into that room, and they've got some kind of lights. Okay, so he put some kind of a light, we're imagining a lantern, and if there's one mirror, you get one reflection, right? So that's what we just saw with the light globe, the shadow, and the sun as its reflection. That's this case. Now Baba said if you put two mirrors facing each other, we had to do it this way because you can't artistically represent them if they're actually facing each other. You get innumerable reflections. But he said if they're at right angles, you get four reflections. And he put up two mirrors with a light and had all the boys file past to where they could see it. It'd be fun to do this sometime. Nadia and I tried to do it, but we couldn't get two good mirrors. But now this winds up relating to another of the topics that your 7th grade astronomy teacher left out somehow. So, okay, here's the light globe, right? And here's the shadow, our Earth, planet A is our Earth, and here's the sun. Okay, we've already seen that. The reflection of our Earth falls into emptiness, and that reflection in emptiness receives the light of the light globe and shines it back upon our world, and thus our sun comes into existence. Okay, we've already seen that. But it turns out that our particular world is threefold. It's not true of most worlds. This seems to be exceptional to our world. There are 3 worlds or 3 planets that are somehow part of one world. We're not talking about 3 spheres. These seem to be 3 gross worlds. So there are 3 shadows of a single light globe. And what happens then is that the light globe then shines. Okay, the second world, B, casts its reflection into emptiness. That's this circle here, right? And that reflection captures the light of the light globe and shines it back on world B. Thus, world B acquires its first sun. But this reflection also receives the light of world A, the light of the sun of the world A, and thus that gets reflected, and in this way, world B has 2 suns. Right? I mean, it's very weird. I mean, it's obviously not talking about our solar system or anything like that. Obviously not. And world C, it receives, you see from here, the light of the light globe and reflects it back onto world C. It also receives the light of world A, our Earth, and reflects that back as another sun, and it receives the 2 sunlight from B, and it reflects that back. And in this way, world C acquires 4 suns. Now, I'm going over this kind of quickly, and I know it's kind of odd and a bit strange. So you kind of have to study this diagram for a while. And once again, this obviously cannot be our solar system because we don't have 3 planets all orbiting the sun right in sync with each other, and the lights wouldn't be bright enough, etc., etc., etc. He must be describing some kind of principle by which this inner light of the light globe generates the gross sphere. Must be something like that. Yeah.
So he didn't explain what world B or world C represents?
He did.
Okay.
And so we'll go on to that. In fact, these 3 worlds are all 3 shadows of one light globe. And he says that these 3 planets are linked. And this is where this diagram comes into play. This is a rupee in those days was 16 annas. That was the coin then. 16 annas added up to 1 rupee. So in world C, people have 16 annas of intelligence and 0 annas of feeling. All head, no heart.
Yeah.
In world B, they have 12 annas of intelligence and 4 of heart. Okay, 75% intellect. And in world C, the world of dummies, they have 8 and 8. That's us.
World A.
And it's what?
World A.
Yeah.
World A. Oh, world A, yeah, sorry.
8 and 8, yeah.
So that's our Earth.
So is that what he's trying to explain? Because my question was from your previous figure, what it is that Baba wants to explain about this suns and the light globe creates, and the 3 worlds. What it is that, why was he even come up with this figure?
Yeah.
What is it?
I mean, that's really for people to figure out.
Okay.
It's a very surprising topic for Baba to go into with these boys. Why did they need to know about this? But apparently they did.
But why do they not need to?
One thing is, it very much does develop the understanding of a light globe, right?
Yeah.
The light globe's role in the generation of the universe. Obviously, something is going on here in a mystical level. It must be so.
Is this also, can we talk about those three, what Baba said, in some worlds there is 50-50 intellect and heart?
Yeah.
In another words is only like intellect and...
That's what this is about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then they incarnate on earth to experience love.
He didn't talk about that here, but it must be so.
As far as I know, the place that I know to find this about the ABC worlds is in that little book called The Advancing Stream of Life.
Yeah, and where he got that was from the Meher message, and where the Meher message got that is from here.
Yeah.
This is the source of it. I haven't talked about it, but there's an appendix where I didn't go to the Advancing Stream of Life, but where I really do show how this got recapitulated in the Meher message and in Ramju Abdullah's book in 1933 and in the Meher Baba Journal. But these were the original dictations from which that came. Yeah.
Back in the day when they had honors.
Huh?
Back in the day when they had honors.
They had
don't
honors,
exist
yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
I want to respond to Mahmoud's earlier question. That was my question for a long time about what does this have to do with Baba? You know, what does it have to do? How does it give me a sense of how the world is in illusion, right? And for the longest time, I thought this is just gratuitous. It just doesn't have any meaning for me. Then all
Baba
of a
was
sudden,
just wasting his time.
yeah,
And their time
all
too.
All of a sudden, I'm looking at that and I just felt, oh, it is illusion. It does show me that it's illusion. So eventually, I think these things change you once they sort of settle in.
That's right.
You know, in Chanji's diary, he does refer to some of these lectures, and he writes in parentheses, a puzzle.
Yeah.
He was nice.
Well said.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was very polite.
Yeah.
Nice. Good. It's all good.
Now here's the other main aspect, talking about astronomy. Ooh, our time is just about up, isn't it? Okay. So we'll resume from here tomorrow. I'm thinking, by the way, in the afternoon session, I had put on the description it would be on the 6 talks to the men, but I may spill some of this over because actually this content is ultimately most significant. Those are worth reading though, so I don't want to get the impression they're not. But Baba talked about, he began this actually quite early in the series, and then there's a long lapse, and then he resumed. So there are a series of diagrams too that are related to this. But he said that out of Paramatma, and elsewhere he calls it Darya, ocean, there come 7 ranges of planets. One of them has just rock. One of them has rock and wind. Another has rock, wind, and metal. Another rock, wind, metal, and water. And the next one adds vegetation. The next one adds animals. And the 7th range is humans. There is he does seem to say that there are only 3 planets with human life on it, and but the diagrams say otherwise. Also, in God Speaks, there is a footnote where Baba indicates there are only 3 planets with human life, but there were other places where Baba definitely says there are 18,000 of them. So there is an appendix
With
where,
the human life?
with human, yeah.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
It's 18,000 with life, but only two or three have human.
Well,
Intelligent.
in God Speaks, there's the note that says that. But elsewhere, there's a whole page of dictation to Francis Bravazon where he said 18,000 with human life.
And that explanation is in the appendix, right, of the book? What Baba told,
Francis? Yeah. Yeah, there is an appendix that goes over all of this. So we have contradictory statements, there's no doubt about it.
It's very convincing.
So I reviewed all of that, and I'm actually quite convinced that 18,000 is the correct number. But you can read that for yourself. So when we start having schisms, we have prawn and squash, and prawn and
Prawns and gosh.
gosh. So there's one schism. And we can have 3 planets, 18,000. We can have another schism
So
on
my
that.
theory is there's 3 categories of planets.
3 categories of planets. I don't think so. I think he's actually talking about 3 planets. But you can go for the
We got a
categories.
schism going right here.
We have a schism.
According to me, the category A has only 1 planet, but categories B and C have multiple planets.
Well, if you said category B has 2 and category C has 4, I'll be more accommodating. I don't know, I think we have a heretic here.
I'll send that to my board of directors.
Oh God, look at that. We have somebody, Sam is just dismissing the whole thing. Yeah. Okay.
Well, we have a category D for done.
Okay. Jai Baba, everyone. We'll resume from here tomorrow.